From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here. It is a Tuesday, and we've got a good show on tap for you. You know, a lot of interesting legislation working its way through the Capitol here as the session is expected, I think, to end today, perhaps. And, you know, some things made it to law, others did not. Some came very close, and one of the more talked about bills dealt with gun rights here in the state of Tennessee. And, of course, we know, here in Tennessee, that's a very, very, very important thing. It can stimulate some controversy, but we're going to get into the issue of this whole debate where yesterday, I guess, I don't know if it was late yesterday, but the bill seeking to allow Tennesseans to openly carry firearms in public without permits was defeated in the House subcommittee. But don't think for a moment it's going to go away. There will be a next legislative session, and there will be another bill on this front. But we're going to get into the basics of maybe what happened yesterday, and exactly, again, for those of you maybe who still have a little confusion of what exactly this does with our guest this morning, a big supporter of it who just told me as he sat down it is not going away. John Harris with the Tennessee Firearms Association. Nice to have you on, John.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
As always, a pleasure, and it's good to have you here. And it is interesting. We didn't know exactly what we'd be dealing with on this morning's program until we saw how things played out yesterday. But a little disappointed on your part this morning?
Well, there's a difference between disappointed and not necessarily surprised.
Okay. Sure.
So I have done this now for almost 20 years, and you get used to waking up and seeing the results of bad decisions by legislators.
Well, and I guess you're right. Not surprised, even though, let's face it, what was it? The full Senate passed its version of the bill 25 to 2. To 2? 25 to 2. Holy cow. So it had a lot of support going, but it just didn't make it yesterday out of, I guess it was a House subcommittee.
Yeah, and a sad fact about that is this bill, when it came to the House subcommittee, had 37 House sponsors. 37 House members were supporting this bill. And the way the system is currently corrupted, the vote of 10 members killed it.
Okay.
And you got to question whether or not that system is fair, right, or reasonable if it takes fewer votes to kill a bill than those that are supporting it.
Gotcha. Understand. All right. Listen, what I'd like to do, and we're, as usual, going to get a lot of calls because we're talking about gun issues this morning. 737-7587 is the number if you want to jump in and get going with this. But, all right. Is this accurate? Okay. The measure sought to eliminate the state's background and training requirements for openly carrying guns in public, but would have kept the permit rules in place for concealed firearms.
That is the type of spin that the Tennessee Department of Safety is putting on it, and it's really a misrepresentation of the
All right. Give me your representation of what this law or bill would have done if it became law.
Okay. Current law basically says it's illegal to carry a gun, period. And that in order to do so legally in Tennessee, you have to have a handgun carry permit.
Okay.
This law would have simply reversed that basic initial premise and said, as long as you're openly carrying a gun, that's legal.
Okay, when you say openly, meaning this would mean how would they have to carry it?
Well, they could either carry it in their hand or concealed, or they could be transporting it in a vehicle even.
Oh, but that's openly then? Because
yes.
I'm trying to, this is where it gets confusing for someone like myself who's not a real gun aficionado, what it means to someone. How is that different than what it is now? Now you have to get a permit to own a gun.
Right. Well, no, not to own the gun,
or
to transport
to transport the gun. To transport the gun. And so this bill would have?
This bill would have, in a couple different paragraphs, it would have said if you're openly carrying a handgun, you don't have to have a permit. Okay. So the presumption flipped from illegal to legal conduct.
Okay.
And then it said also in a separate paragraph, it essentially deleted a section of the code that required people to have permits in order to transport loaded rifles, shotguns, or pistols in their own vehicles.
Okay.
So it would have allowed that. Now, where this whole concealment controversy arises is the permits we have are open or concealed. They let you carry either way.
Yes.
We got a 20-year history of that.
Right.
Safety says, or was trying to say, that this bill destroys or changes the law to the point that the permits are only for concealment. But what safety completely misrepresented to the public was that there's a lot of statutes like the public parks, school grounds, the law that passed last year on parking lots. All of those specifically say that only the people who have the permits can carry in a park or leave their gun in a school ground parking lot or leave it at work in your car. So It doesn't change any of that. There's almost like three classes. There's the open carry, which basically would have applied to streets and sidewalks.
Okay.
Then there's the carry in parks and other places that are semi-restricted that require a permit, whether you're open or concealed.
All right.
And then there's the concealment standard, which would have required a permit in all instances had this passed.
All right, so had it passed, for someone like me, let's say I go and I decide I'm going to buy a gun, what would I be able to do?
Had this passed, you would have been able to leave the gun store with the gun.
So I could go into whatever store sells the guns, go in, say, I like that one there, that's $500. Okay, here's my $500. Right there on the spot, I can walk out on it.
Once you pass the background check.
So the background checks will remain?
For the purchase of firearms.
For the purchase of firearms. Okay, and then what can I do? And then, so the background check, now as far as a permit, if it as it stands now under the law, if I go in, I have to do the background check, and then I have to get a permit as well?
If you're going to carry it loaded.
Right.
Now, and part of the problem that this bill fixed, or would have fixed, is the vast distinction between what people think of as a loaded gun and how the law defines a loaded gun. Most people think of a loaded gun as a gun that has ammunition in it. The law defines a loaded firearm as a gun, even an empty gun, that has ammunition anywhere near it.
Nearby.
Yeah, but he uses the phrase the vicinity. And I've actually defended people who have been charged and pled to criminal possession of a firearm because they had an empty shotgun. They've been hunting. This particular guy I'm thinking of was turkey hunting. Had an empty shotgun. He had on camo. He had decoys in his back seat. He had 3 shotgun shells that are clearly the kind you use for hunting. In the front seat, he was charged by a Metro officer for carrying a loaded shotgun.
Because under the, and I guess under the law, that was, but it seems absurd, doesn't it?
It is absurd. And this law would have fixed and reconciled for most people what a loaded gun is and is not. Because the law presently is written by people who are more interested in stopping criminals than understanding civil rights.
I guess, though, you could assume, though, the difference, if the bullets are right nearby, I mean, you understand maybe the larger purpose of that in case you don't want the gun loaded. If a bullet's right next to it,
right,
it takes you about 10 seconds, if less, to load it.
Sure, but the point is that concept is not in line with what most people think of as legal action.
No, it's not. When I think loaded, I think it's got to have the round in the chamber. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. So maybe they have to, I see what you're saying there. All right, and why do you think this was important, in your opinion, to move forward? Why is it important that, I should be able to go in, pass the background check, and that's not going anywhere, right? Background checks still are in place.
Purchase firearms.
To purchase the firearm, and then not then have to get a permit to carry the weapon.
We believe that that's more, first off, it's just fundamentally more consistent with the Constitution the way it's written.
Okay.
That where it says shall not be infringed, and the concept or the belief or understanding that requiring a permit is an infringement.
And talk about what requirements go into getting a permit.
To get a permit under Tennessee law right now, it's as much as a 3 to 4 month process. You have to go take a training class, which is an all-day course. In some instances, it's a 2-day course, and there's a cost to that runs from $50 to $250 depending on where you go. Then you have to make an appointment with the Department of Safety to go to a driver's training station to fill out an application, and then they make another appointment for you to go somewhere else and be fingerprinted. So you spend 3 days and spend a couple $100 getting a permission slip from the state of Tennessee to carry a gun, which a lot of people feel is a fundamental right that shouldn't have any restrictions on it. Okay, and we'll get into this with our viewers as well, and I know they have strong opinions. I see what you're saying there in terms of the extra steps you have to take. Now, sitting here too, I fear, though, that there will be some people that, and maybe it is a fundamental right, but there's a lot of buffoons out there, and they're going to go and they're going to buy themselves this gun after their background check, and they're going to have no clue what to do with it or how to handle it, and they're going to shoot themselves or someone else by accident because they don't have any training, because they're stupid. All right, so does that not concern you at all, eliminating the whole fact that you have to have any training? Well, see, here's what we know as a fact, and that is that between 29 and 31 other states already have this kind of law. And if that was a genuine concern, it would have happened. That kind of problem, and you're saying we haven't seen would be rampant in 30 states, and it's not. So you think most of these people that do buy it will have had perhaps training from their family members, or have grown up learning about the proper handling of a weapon? Correct. we grew up in an age with Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner shooting everybody and everything, and we don't do that.
Yeah, well, hopefully you know better than that. All right, we'll take a break on that note when we come back. We'll take your phone call. 737-7587 is the number if you want to join us. If you're on hold, stay there. We'll get into the details of this and then maybe your thoughts about what happens next.
Sure.
Like you said, it's not going away. John Harris with us with the Tennessee Firearms Association. Always good talking to him. We'll be back with your calls and more right after this.